Now, the South African National Editors Forum has called the killings of journalists in the Gaza conflict a continued targeting of media workers. This follows the deaths of 4 Al Jazeera journalists and an assistant who were killed when a tent was struck near Shifa Hospital in eastern Gaza City. Now, for more, we are joined by Tshamano Makhadi, who's the Sanef Deputy Chairperson. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Very sad news indeed coming out of Gaza once again. And as Sanef, you have described it as another blatant and premeditated attack on press freedom. Tell us more.
Good evening, Masa. Indeed, it can only be categorized as a clear plan to kill these journalists. And I think the Israeli government, they themselves, they've also admitted or accepted the fact that they targeted them, the 6 journalists from Al Jazeera. We find that extremely disturbing. It's one thing if it's just an accident where you are caught up in that cross of fire, but where journalists are simply just targeted, not only does it undermines media freedom, but also undermines human rights.
What we've also seen following, of course, since October 7th, but also following these attacks of the killings of the 6 journalists were, again, protests all over the world, including here in South Africa as well. And as Sanef, you've also said there needs to be maximum pressure to ensure that there is immediate cessation in Gaza, but also, obviously, the immediate killing of our colleagues in Gaza as well. What do you think it's going to take? Because, you know, while there are protests and outcry all over the world, it doesn't seem to be heeding on listening ears.
And that's the challenge we are faced with, because if you look at the number of conversations that have been, taking place, I think, including even at times when, leaders have just had what seem to be very promising conversations. The next moment you hear of, stories about some of these, attacks. So I think we must continue to speak out. And I think from a media's point of view, our colleagues, globally, they have been speaking. And I think it also, takes now concerted effort. And I'm talking about political leaders globally who have to, stand up and say, this really has to come to an end. It has to stop. You cannot, we cannot continue to see a situation where human life is undermined in the manner in which we have seen in Gaza.
As Sanef, you've also mentioned, talking about the targeting of journalists. Another disturbing factor is the targeting of journalists' loved ones as well, or the fear of the targeting of their loved ones, meaning that at these kinds of times, when they're reporting from these kinds of scenes as well, they kind of need to distance themselves from their families, just so that they don't get caught up in the crossfire of this target as well.
Really unthinkable, Martha, if you think, if you think about it, Masa, if you think about it, very disturbing, because, journalists are simply doing their work. And to now get to a point where loved ones are also, targeted, where people always have to live in fear. I cannot imagine the many families, obviously, of, our colleagues who find themselves simply just doing their work, but also a very important work, essential work, I must say, because the world really needs to know about, these stories, what is really going on in there. But what we have seen, it's very disturbing. But also, if you think about reports around famine, how do you not allow people to have food, to starve them over and above the torture which they find themselves, subjected to on a daily basis? It's absolutely cruel. There's just no other way of describing it. And I'm hoping that with some of the discussions leading to the G20, these are really issues that have to be top of that agenda, where global leaders have to look into these matters.
And Tshamano, while we're speaking about our colleagues there as well, according to figures from the Palestinian Journalists Syndicate, there were at least 1,500 journalists in Gaza working there before October 2023. And according to the United Nations, that there are at least 242 Palestinian journalists who have been killed since then, and that number also continues to grow, as we're seeing with also non-Palestinian journalists, the ones who are also from Al Jazeera as well. So what does that say for the volume of this message that we're trying to say, let's not stop talking about it, let's not stop reporting about it, but the number of people who are doing that job are dwindling?
It's terrible. Absolutely, absolutely terrible, Masa. If you think about it, just globally, the number of journalists, including here at home, I mean, the glass ceiling, which was released just a few years back, at some point we were told we had about 10,000, working journalists. Is that still the number that we have? Surely not. And when you now have those that are working, and now that number now been reduced by simply, being killed with very deliberate intentions, that's very, very, disturbing. And it is worrying. It's concerning. You just wonder, where are we headed? Where is the world going? So all of these matters, I really must say, they are subjects of great concern, and one can only hope that leaders look into these issues. South Africa has already made a point, by the way, and I know that there have been talks even at a continental level. But is that enough? The United States, with all that President Trump has been talking about, is that enough? Why is it that leaders are not standing up to a point where this really just has to come to an end as a matter of now, and not keep talking? I cannot think of something as cruel more than what we have seen so far. What else do we still want to see?
Tshamano, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Really appreciate your time. That was the Sanef Deputy Chairperson Tshamano Makhadi.